I met Isabella at a charity dinner on a fall day. I was a young sports agent working hard on my career, and Isabella was a well-known socialite whose beauty and elegance overshadowed the entire ballroom. Our eyes met in the crowd, and we were fascinated by each other. After that, we started a romantic relationship. Isabella's intelligence and humor fascinated me, and my maturity and stability conquered her heart. We fell in love with each other and decided to spend the rest of our lives together. After our marriage, we moved into a villa in the suburbs and started building our dream home. As a sports agent, I have a very busy job. I have to deal with clients and partners every day and travel frequently and work overtime. But I know that behind my career, my family is my strongest support. Therefore, no matter how busy I am, I always find time to accompany Isabella and share the details of life together. Isabella was fully immersed in the social circles of high society. She attends charity events, art salons, and private parties, where she meets many influential people. Whenever she goes out, she dresses up and makes herself the center of attention. Looking at my wife's glamorous appearance in social occasions, I am both proud of her, but also vaguely uneasy. As time passed, I gradually realized that Isabella was less and less devoted to her family. She no longer shared her life and thoughts with me as she once had. Even when we were in the same room, her mind often drifted away. Gradually, I began to wonder if there was something hidden behind her frequent socializing. I tried to communicate with Isabella, hoping to mend the growing rift between us. But every conversation ended in failure, with her citing work commitments or social engagements as the reason for avoiding the conversation. The trust between us was beginning to show dangerous cracks. Thus, in our apparently quiet lives, each of us had our own preoccupations. I was busy with work to numb my anxiety about marriage, while Isabella was more frequent in social situations, as if to escape from a certain reality she did not want to face. I knew that our perfect married life was going through a silent crisis, but I'm still not willing to believe that the woman who once loved me deeply will betray our love. I chose to turn a blind eye, keep my fingers crossed, and hope that everything is just my oversimplification. However, fate seems to have written a different script for us. With the passage of time, the truth hidden beneath the surface will eventually surface. Isabella and I will pay a heavy price for our choices. As Isabella's behavior became more and more erratic, I could no longer ignore it. I began to follow her every move, hoping to find the reason behind her changes. I noticed that Isabella's interactions with Carlos, our gardener, were becoming more frequent. Whenever Carlos came to take care of the garden, Isabella would always be there to entertain him, and the two of them would often talk and laugh in the garden, as if they had a lot to talk about. And after Carlos left, Isabella's mood was always soaring, as if something good had happened. At first, I tried to convince myself that this was just a normal employer-employee interaction. Carlos was a handsome young man, and perhaps it was just that Isabella appreciated his work and enjoyed talking to him. But deep down, a disturbing thought began to grow. Was it really just a work relationship? My suspicions deepened, but I couldn't find any hard evidence. I began to observe their every move in secret, trying to pick up on the clues. But Isabella and Carlos seemed to be very discreet and never crossed the line. Just as I was about to convince myself to let go of my skepticism, something completely shattered my illusions. We had planned a family party for the weekend and invited our friends and family. But the day before the party, Isabella suddenly told me that she had to cancel the party because she had to attend an important charity event. The reason sounded reasonable, but I felt something strange about it. In the past, Isabella would never cancel a family gathering for work. What's more, the charity event she was talking about seemed to come out of nowhere, and I've never heard her mention it before. My instincts told me that it wasn't that simple, that Isabella was hiding something from me, and that it probably had something to do with Carlos. The thought of it made me feel a pain in my heart. Had our marriage come to such a pass? I tried to communicate with Isabella in the hope that she would give me a reasonable explanation. However, every time I talked to her, she seemed to be very perfunctory and avoided talking about my concerns. Her attitude convinced me that she was deliberately hiding something. I felt a deep sense of powerlessness and frustration. Our once close marriage is now filled with suspicion and disconnection. I kept asking myself, what brought us to this point? Is it because I don't care enough for her, or is it because her love for me has vanished? I knew that if I continued like this, I would only be plunging myself into endless suspicion and pain. I had to find the truth, even if it might break my heart. But I also realized that it would be difficult for me to unravel Isabella's hidden secrets on my own. After much struggle and thought, I made up my mind to take action. I decided to secretly investigate Isabella's whereabouts and look for evidence of her infidelity. Only when I had solid evidence would I be able to confront her and force her to tell the truth. Despite all the anxiety and fear, I knew that this was a step I had to take. I couldn't let our marriage collapse in lies and betrayal. Whatever the truth was, I was ready to face it. And so, with suspicion and determination, I began my plan to secretly investigate Isabella. I knew it would be a long and difficult road, but I had no choice. I had to find a real answer for our marriage, for the vows we had made. After deciding to investigate Isabella undercover, I knew I couldn't do it alone. I needed professional help to obtain solid evidence. So, I hired a private investigator to help me uncover Isabella's secret. The detective's name was Jack, and he was a seasoned veteran. He seemed to understand my situation and promised to do his best to help me find the truth. At my request, he began a full-scale investigation of Isabella, tracking her movements and monitoring her communications in an attempt to find clues to her infidelity. The process of the investigation has been extremely painful. Every day, I lived in agony and fear that Jack would bring news that I could not accept. At the same time, I had to act as if everything was normal and continue to play the role of a good husband, so as not to arouse Isabella's suspicion. I was exhausted from this life of internal and external inconsistency. Weeks passed, and Jack finally made some disturbing discoveries. He realized that Isabella often spent time alone with Carlos when I wasn't home. They often took walks in the garden or chatted in a corner of the villa. Although their behavior was decent, the interaction was too intimate and went beyond normal employer-employee boundaries. The news stuck in my throat, but I knew it wasn't enough to prove Isabella's infidelity. I asked Jack to continue his investigation, hoping to find more solid evidence. In the meantime, I began to spy on Isabella and Carlos, trying to catch a glimpse of them myself. Sometime later, Jack brought me heartbreaking news. During his surveillance of the villa, he had inadvertently photographed Isabella and Carlos in their bedroom. The photos, a clear record of their betrayal, made it impossible for me to lie to myself. At that moment, I felt that the sky was spinning and the whole world was falling apart in front of my eyes. I couldn't believe that my beloved wife would betray our marriage so completely. She not only cheated on me, but also brought that man into our home, defiling our once sacred love nest. Anger, sadness, despair. All these emotions were intertwined in my heart, making me almost unable to breathe. I felt more pain and humiliation than I had ever felt before, as if my heart had been torn out alive. I didn't understand why Isabella was doing this to me. Was our marriage so worthless in her eyes? I looked at the photos over and over again, each time feeling more desperate and angry. I used to think that the love between Isabella and me could overcome everything. But now, I realized how fragile and powerless love is in front of deception and betrayal. That night, I got drunk alone in my study, trying to numb my pain with alcohol. But no matter how much I drank, I couldn't fill the hole inside. I knew I had to make a choice. I could pretend I didn't know and continue to live this outwardly peaceful life, or I could confront Isabella face to face and force her to admit her mistake. But no matter which way I chose, I knew that there was no going back to the old days between Isabella and I. The woman I loved so much, the marriage I had been willing to give everything to, had vanished with those photos. The woman I loved so much, the marriage I was willing to give everything to, had all fizzled out with those photos. Under the combination of alcohol and pain, I gradually lost consciousness. But even in my sleep, I couldn't get rid of those heartbreaking images. They were like a nightmare, tormenting me over and over again, leaving me with no escape. I knew that from now on, my life had changed forever. I had to face the harsh reality and re-examine my relationship with Isabella. But deep inside, a voice told me that I couldn't just let it go. I had to make Isabella pay, to make her feel what it was like to betray me. Thus, In the midst of pain and despair, a thought of revenge slowly grew in my mind. As I gradually recovered from my shock and grief, a cold thought began to swirl in my mind. I will make Isabella taste the price of betrayal. I wanted her to know the consequences of cheating on me, but I didn't act on impulse. I knew that if I wanted to achieve my goal, I had to be patient and plan. A revenge requires careful planning and preparation to ensure that nothing goes wrong. I decided to use all my resources and influence against Isabella and her lover. First, I started gathering evidence. In addition to the photos Jack provided, I needed more evidence to prove their infidelity. I asked Jack to continue to follow them and record all their encounters and interactions. At the same time, I started to investigate Carlos' background, looking for his weaknesses and weaknesses. To my surprise, Carlos is not as simple as he seems. He seemed to have some dark secrets, including a less than honorable past. I knew that these secrets could be a powerful weapon in my quest for revenge. As time went on, the evidence in my possession grew stronger. In addition to the photographs and recordings, I had enough dirt on Carlos to ruin his reputation. I knew it was time to make my move. I decided to take an indirect approach against Isabella and Carlos. I wanted to discredit them in the social circles and show everyone who they really are. But at the same time, I had to make sure that my image wasn't tarnished and that I wasn't suspected of being behind it. I began to bring up Isabella and Carlos in private conversations with friends and coworkers, both consciously and unconsciously. I used an ambiguous tone, suggesting that they had an illicit relationship. I knew that in high society, gossip spreads fast. As soon as there's a whisper, rumors spread like wildfire. At the same time, I started spreading some negative news about Isabella and Carlos on social media. I anonymously posted pictures of them together with suggestive comments. I knew that, in the age of the internet, this would spread the news exponentially. My plan worked. Little by little, rumors about Isabella and Carlos began to circulate in social circles. People began to talk and question their moral character. Some of their so-called friends began to distance themselves from Isabella and stopped inviting her to parties and events. I watched Isabella's social life crumble a little, and I felt a small thrill of vengeance inside. But I knew it wasn't enough. I was going to make her suffer even more. I was going to make her lose everything. Under my authorization, Jack started to reveal those black information about Carlos to some gossip media. Those explosive inside stories soon hit the entertainment pages, and Carlos's image completely collapsed overnight. He not only lost his job, but also faced legal sanctions. Isabella, too, was blamed for the scandal with Carlos. Her once proud reputation is now worthless. Everywhere she goes, she's met with contempt and scorn. She had finally learned the price of betraying me. Watching Isabella's life fall into a complete quagmire has finally calmed my anger a little. But I knew that this was not the end. I wanted to make Isabella lose everything, to make her feel the despair and pain that I had felt. I began to plan my next move. I knew that Isabella's greatest pride was her wealth and position. I wanted her to lose it all, to be left with nothing. I began to look into Isabella's finances, looking for holes in her assets. At the same time, I started to put pressure on Isabella in business. I used my contacts and influence to bring her company to its knees. I knew that if Isabella's financial foundation was destroyed, she would never be able to maintain her current lifestyle. Step by step, I watched Isabella's life fall apart. She lost her friends, her reputation, her fortune. The mask of pride she once wore was now shattered. She had finally tasted the consequences of lying to me. But even so, the anger in my heart was still unquenched. I knew that my revenge was not over. I wanted Isabella to lose everything, including her freedom. I wanted her to spend the rest of her life in prison, suffering every day in remorse and despair. With that, I began to plan my final revenge. I would make Isabella's name known and make her pay the heaviest price. With the evidence in my possession, I knew it was time to publicize the scandalous story of Isabella and Carlos. I would choose the right moment and occasion to show everyone who they really were. The opportunity was fast approaching. In a month's time, the most prestigious charity dinner in town would take place. It was the most important social event of the year, and all the high society celebrities would be there. I knew it would be the perfect time for me to expose Isabella and Carlos. I began to carefully plan the operation. I asked Jack to compile all the evidence into a full report, including photographs, recordings, and transcripts. I wanted to make sure that the evidence was irrefutable enough to discredit Isabella and Carlos. At the same time, I began to lay the groundwork for the operation. I reached out to a few key people in my social circle and gave them some information about Isabella and Carlos. I knew that these people were the opinion leaders of the social circle, and their attitudes could influence the opinions of many people. On the day of the charity dinner, I arrived early. I wanted to make sure I had everything under control. I watched the guests arrive with a mixture of anticipation and nervousness. I knew that this was going to be a battle that would change everything. Halfway through the dinner, the host invited the guests to the stage to make their speeches. This was the moment I had been waiting for. I stood up and walked to the stage, holding the evidence in my hands. I cleared my throat and began my speech. I started by talking about charity and morality, which won the approval of the guests. Then, I changed the subject and started talking about Isabella and Carlos. In a calm tone, I exposed their scandal little by little. I told how they had cheated on me in front of my eyes and how they had staged their sordid behavior in our home. With every word, I made the guests gasp. In order to make everyone believe me, I produced the evidence. I projected the photographs and transcripts on a large screen so that everyone could see the true colors of Isabella and Carlos. The images were so horrifying that the noblewomen covered their mouths and let out a gasp of horror. I saw Isabella and Carlos' faces turn pale. They never thought that I would reveal their secret on such an occasion, in front of everyone. They were at a loss as to how to defend themselves. I didn't give them a chance to defend themselves. I continued to expose Carlos for all the things he was, portraying him as a scum of the earth. I told everyone that such a scumbag was not worthy of Isabella's love. In the face of my accusations, Carlos turned red with shame. He knew that he had lost all credibility in the community and had no chance of getting out of it. Isabella, on the other hand, was sobbing uncontrollably. She never dreamed that she would be ruined in such an occasion. She regretted it so much that she wanted to run away from this place. The guests were in an uproar, and there was a lot of talk. They were outraged by what Isabella and Carlos had done and sympathized with me. Some of Isabella's former friends also distanced themselves from her, fearing that they would be implicated in her scandal. I watched with cold eyes and a sense of vengeance. I knew that I had succeeded in destroying Isabella's and Carlos's reputation, making them unable to hold their heads up in this circle. They would pay the price of betraying me and would taste the coldness of the human world. But I also knew that this was just the beginning. I'm going to make Isabella and Carlos a complete disgrace, and I'm going to make them spend the rest of their lives in misery and despair. After the sensational charity dinner, Isabella and Carlos' scandal quickly spread throughout high society. Those who had once flattered them were now desperate to disassociate themselves from them. Overnight, they went from being the darlings of society to being street rats. I watched with cold eyes and a sense of vengeance. I knew that this was just what Isabella and Carlos deserved. They had betrayed me, and they had to pay the price. Soon Isabella and Carlos began to taste the bitter fruits of their betrayal. Carlos bore the brunt of it and lost his job at my house. No one wanted to hire a morally corrupt gardener who was involved in a scandal of this magnitude. And Carlos lost all of his income overnight and fell into financial ruin. Isabella, on the other hand, isn't doing much better. Her once proud social circle has now closed its doors to her. Her friends, who used to fawn over her, have all cut themselves off from her, fearing that they too will be implicated in her scandal. Isabella can no longer attend the lavish parties and gatherings, and her place in high society is in jeopardy. But I wasn't satisfied with that. I knew that it would take an even more devastating blow to make Isabella and Carlos really suffer. So, I began taking legal action, preparing to take the initiative in the divorce proceedings against Isabella. I hired the best divorce attorney I could find and started preparing all the documents and evidence. I wanted to make sure that I had the upper hand in the courtroom and that Isabella would get nothing out of the divorce proceedings. I first preempted the divorce proceedings by filing a petition in court, claiming most of the community property on the grounds that Isabella had been unfaithful. I provided all kinds of evidence collected by Jack to prove Isabella's illicit relationship with Carlos. This hard evidence put Isabella in a very passive position in court. Next, I asked for high damages on the basis of Isabella's wrongdoing during the marriage. I cited her neglect of the family, her squandering of my money, and her fornication with Carlos. These allegations made Isabella morally untenable and almost impossible to refute. With the help of my lawyers, I have pushed Isabella to the brink in the courtroom. Not only did I want her to be financially ruined, I wanted her to be dishonored. I wanted everyone to know what happens when you betray me. The outcome of the divorce proceedings was exactly what I expected. The judge ruled that Isabella would have to pay a large sum of money in damages and lose most of her joint assets. The mansion and villa, which she had been so proud of, now belonged to me. She, on the other hand, had to move to a modest apartment and live on a shoestring. Watching Isabella fall from the clouds, my anger was finally calmed a little, but I knew that this was not the end. I wanted to make Isabella lose everything and let her spend the rest of her life in despair. At my behest, the media began to report on Isabella's scandalous behavior, portraying her as a morally bankrupt, shameless woman. The sensationalism of the stories left Isabella's reputation in tatters, and she was never to be seen again. At the same time, I began to put financial pressure on Isabella. I used my influence in the business world to bring her company into trouble and make her investments go bankrupt one by one. I wanted Isabella to realize that without my support, she was nothing. Gradually, Isabella fell into complete despair. Not only was her reputation ruined and her finances shattered, but her friends left her in droves. She lived every day in pain and remorse, not knowing what to do with herself. Carlos, on the other hand, didn't get away with it. Not only did he lose his job, but he was imprisoned for various scandals. His life in prison has left him with a taste for the cold, and he will never be able to turn his life around. Watching Isabella and Carlos hit rock bottom in their lives finally satisfied the fire of vengeance in my heart. They betrayed me, and they must pay the ultimate price. This is what they deserve. When Isabella's and Carlos' lives fell into the abyss, my plan of revenge finally came to fruition. As I watched them struggle in pain and despair, my anger was finally calmed. I knew that they had paid a terrible price for betraying me, but as the thrill of revenge wore off, I found myself in an unprecedented void. I suddenly realized that for the past few months, my life had been completely dominated by revenge. All my time and energy had been invested in getting back at Isabella and Carlos, but I had lost sight of what I really wanted. I began to re-examine my life. I realized that although revenge gave me a brief moment of satisfaction, it couldn't really fill the wounds inside. I had lost Isabella and the good life we had, and that was a pain that no amount of vengeance could ever make up for. I decided that it was time to let go of the past and start over. I want to leave behind all the pain and resentment and find a new meaning in my life. I want to rebuild my life and find a new purpose and direction. I started by getting back to work. As a sports agent, I had big ambitions for my career. I decided that I would put all my energy into my work and make my agency the best in the industry. I began to work harder to develop clients and signed one sports star after another for the company. Thanks to my efforts, the company's business flourished and my career reached new heights. But I know that success in business is not enough. I wanted to find the meaning of life and true inner peace. I started to get more involved in charity work, using my resources and influence to help those in need. I sponsored several sports youth groups to help children from underprivileged families realize their sports dreams. I also set up a charitable fund for women and children who are victims of domestic violence. In helping others, I have found a sense of fulfillment that I have never known before. I realized that the meaning of life is not only about personal achievement, but also about how much we can make a difference in the world. Whenever I see the smiles on the faces of the recipients, I feel a great sense of satisfaction. Gradually, my contribution to charity has been recognized by society. The media began to report positively on my deeds, praising me as a responsible and caring entrepreneur. My reputation was restored. People began to forget what had happened to me and paid more attention to my contribution to public welfare. As I rebuilt my career and reputation, I also began to re-examine my love life. After Isabella's betrayal, I once lost faith in love. But as time went by, I realized that I couldn't give up my pursuit of love just because of one failure. I began to open my heart again, to meet new people and experience new relationships. I eventually met Sophie, a woman who shared my vision. She is an educator who has always been committed to helping children from underprivileged families get a better education. We met at a charity event and realized that we shared the same vision and pursuit. We started dating and found that we had an uncanny understanding and attraction for each other. Sophie's kindness, intelligence, and independence attracted me deeply. In her company, I feel happier and more satisfied than ever before. I know she is the one I have been waiting for. With Sophie's encouragement, I decided to write an autobiography about my life experiences and journey. I analyzed my pain, struggles, and growth without reservation, hoping that my story can inspire more people to face the challenges of life with courage. To my surprise, the autobiography has been a huge success. Many readers have told me that my story has given them great inspiration and encouragement. They saw resilience and hope in my experience and realized that even when you hit rock bottom, you still have the courage to get back up. With the support of thousands of readers and Sophie's companionship, I have found the meaning and direction of life again. I realized that the true meaning of life does not lie in revenge, but in how we grow through pain and how we find hope in despair. Only by letting go of past hurts and embracing the possibilities of the future can we truly gain inner peace and freedom. Today, I continue to work hard in sports agency and philanthropy to impact and change the world in my own way. In life, I have Sophie's love and companionship, and every day is full of joy and fulfillment. Dear friends, if you are experiencing betrayal and hurt in your marriage, I want to say to you that I deeply understand your pain and despair at this moment. I was once like you, suffering from my wife's infidelity and feeling that my life had lost its meaning. But I want to tell you that revenge is not the answer. It may bring short-lived pleasure, but it can't really heal the trauma inside. Only by letting go of the past and rediscovering the meaning of life can we get rid of the pain and make a new start. I hope my story can inspire you. The meaning of life does not lie in the amount of suffering we have endured, but in how we have grown from it. As long as we carry hope and walk bravely, we will be able to come out of the darkness and find inner peace. Remember, no matter what happens, don't give up your love and pursuit of life. As long as we hold on to our beliefs, we will be able to create a better future. Bless you, my friend. May you have the courage to start over and find your own happiness. Thank you for taking the time to listen to today's story. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe if you haven't already. If you have a story to share about your own or someone else's experience, please feel free to contact me. Take care.